Are you ready for some real football? I love the NFL. I wore their shield.
Power Athlete Nation, what's going on? We got an exciting episode for you. We're taking some conversations inside the game, inside the NFL. We have speed coach Derek Hansen here joining us to drop some expertise. And we have Luke, and then Mr. NFL, 10-year NFL veteran John Welbourn.
Yeah, has been. Just talking about stuff in the past.
And
Always was. Never will be.
And Tex here. So we're going to dive into an exciting show. We've been catching up with Derek. It's almost halfway. It's more than halfway through the NFL season. And you've expressed to us some different observations and things you've seen in terms to common injuries throughout the league, some notes and performance. We have the famous Daniel Jones sniper. There's a lot of memes going around, some wrestlers coming out of nowhere to trip this dude up, but some fun things like that you reached out to us and wanted to dive in to both the injury side of things and performance in this weird COVID-19 2020, I was going to say 2020 season.
Can we just start talking about 2021?
Not yet. That comes Super Bowl time. We'll get Derek back on for playoffs. But I know we have a whole half season to get into, but what are some immediate observations that you've seen, just common themes show up throughout the games this season?
Obviously, it's the injury piece, right? And how many injuries, the massive injuries. I think now it's 30 ACLs without a preseason. I think there's 13 Achilles tendon injuries, lots of ankle injuries, lots of hamstrings, probably more in a shorter period of time than we've seen before. And then on top of that, you have these bizarre sort of COVID impacts of like players not being able to play in quarantine and all that. So rosters are decimated. And some of the numbers that we looked at in terms of how many of these players aren't playing and how much money is left, I guess I've been saying money left in the training room, is pretty interesting, and how it correlates to how teams are doing, I guess their standings, right? And I think the two examples that we brought up was the 49ers, which is has some of the most games lost to injury, and also now there was a report that came out about how much money the Denver Broncos are paying to people who are injured. So those are the first things that came out, and then obviously there's a lot of individual stories in there as well.
Yeah, no, I always kind of look at this from like almost like the side of winning, and that, what does it take for a team to win? I mean, we watched last night with the Jets and the Patriots, and like the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, is Cam Newton really the guy that fits within the Patriot system? Can he win some games? I mean, he has a pedigree. He was a NFL MVP. Played in the Super Bowl and has been a marquee player for 10 years. And I'm out there watching him. And the hard part is the Jets are awful. I mean, like they're 0-9. It's the first time that they've ever been 0-9. I mean, not that the Jets have ever been a legitimate powerhouse, not for at least for a while. And Cam Newton's out there doing some things, and they're like, oh, look at him, like this pass rush isn't good. And then they started kind of going through the players, and like, these aren't the marquee players. And, Cam Newton's he barely wins that game. Like, he has to come back. So it's not like they went out and, like the Patriots of old, where all of a sudden they see an 0-8, New York Jets, and they go hang them for 70 points. So
in line with that, in the Patriots, there are players on the defensive side of the ball. One Hightower, their best defensive captain, he chose and opted to sit out for the season.
Yeah,
so that already put them in a position of...
Well, and then they got to bring in, Tom Brady's been their rock for all these years, and now all of a sudden they got to bring in a new guy who's got this tumultuous past. Nobody tried to sign him. They signed him for, I think it was like $1 million, which I know sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme
he's betting on himself.
Is chump
I'm
change.
mad at that.
So he comes in when nobody else was giving him a shot, and has come in and just been really lackluster. Even against a team that was 0-9, it's 0-9, it was still lackluster. And when I say like on the side of winning, I'm always looking at like, is this a player that can be a difference maker? Can this player come in and be the guy, like as an offensive lineman, if this guy comes in and all of a sudden he's driving a dude off the ball, and now all of a sudden the runs, like we were talking on our last podcast, where man, who was that big running back we were watching that was moving fast, but he looked like he was moving slow real patiently? Was that Cook?
Oh, Cook, yeah.
Yeah. And as I went back and watched that, man, like the offensive line was getting some really good movement. And, you start thinking like, hey, that guy's doing well. What's the difference maker? You saw, Dak Prescott get hurt. And as you guys know, I have my reservations about the Cowboys from playing them and beating up on them for years. But he was a guy that was a difference maker for them and made them, like a decent contender. And all of a sudden you remove that one player. And, I mean, the Cowboys are in a downward spiral for that. So, thinking about this and looking at it and being like, okay, difference makers, and we see these statistics where the Niners have like $80 million in cap tied up with injured players, and the Denver Broncos have like $45 million just in this year tied up on guys on IR. Like, those are their difference makers, those are their stars, they're the marquee players, the people that they lean on, and all of a sudden those guys aren't part of the game. And you're working with 2s and 3s and 4s and guys that maybe you're going to have a chance down the line, and you can always band-aid with a few of those guys. But when all of a sudden it's everybody, like the quality at which it comes down, and then you have teams that don't get bit by the injury bug, like we were talking about, like the Kansas City Chiefs and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And all of a sudden you're looking at this and being like, oh man, this is going to make the playoffs really exciting, because we're going to see those teams, maybe in the AFC Championship. But who's the team that's going to represent the NFC? And I mean, going into the season, the Niners were big time contenders. So it's really what I would call it's par for the course for 2020.
Yeah, and if you start looking at some of these organizations, like pro sport, there's going to be pointing of fingers, and there's going to be like, okay, who's the scapegoat, which we have talked about before. In these cases, who do you guys think is responsible? Is it just is it going to be one of those years, COVID years, where it's like, it was just an off year for everyone, so everybody keeps their job? Do you think that's going to happen, or are people going to be held accountable?
Heads got to roll, don't they?
Yeah.
There's an asterisk for some of these folks?
Yeah, I think what happens is like the stink of losing, sometimes they just got to get cut out. And as I look at this, what I really, to me, this is a problem that we saw coming 6, 8, 9 months ago, when all of a sudden the players who should have been training and doing everything that they were on house arrest. I mean, not house arrest, lockdown. So they couldn't train in facilities. They probably weren't training in other places that they should have been. And that level of preparation that takes you the whole offseason to not only heal up from injuries, but also get in that preparation phase, periodize from hey, I'm going to build some glycolytic engine early in the year and lactic threshold, type stuff. And then I'm going to progress into strength and speed and start getting ready for all this. And that periodization just kind of got cut off at the knees and didn't happen. And, how many guys were, on lockdown and didn't have weights or didn't have access and, with their families. And it was just kind of, people were unprepared. Like, how many people have a dope gym and people to come train with them? I just think that there was, this was an issue. Like, when we saw this whole thing going down, if we'd done this podcast, we're going to be like, oh God, like the injury bug is going to come for a lot of people just because we're pulling them out of the system. I wonder that when we look back at this, if the teams that avoided the injury bug were the ones that put more, solutions in place during this time. Like, were the, Kansas City Chiefs basically buying equipment and shipping it to their players and Zooming and I wonder what that level of access, and we won't really know until after the fact. But I think the really smart teams were the ones that just didn't rely upon the player or the individual to figure out a solution. I think they were probably very more proactive in doing that. And, the level of preparation has to be there. This isn't just something that you show up 3 weeks before training camp and get in shape. I mean, we would start training right around Valentine's Day, and we would grind all the way, to the third week of July when we went to training camp. And there was, planned rest days, and this is what you had to do, and it was very, very segmented. And I think by cutting that out, all of a sudden now we're in this deficit. And is it just luck? But I think it really comes back to when we look at 2020 in the hindsight for the NFL, the teams that manage that situation the better, I think, are going to be the most successful ones.
At the moment now, you're allowed 8 padded practice, so full contact practices per season. So then it's on the coaching staff.
Is that the season, including that's not including training camp, though?
No. During the 16-game, going live season. So how was practice back in the day, midweek? Was it all walkthroughs once you finally made the team?
No. So when I'll date myself with this one. my first year in Philly, we went 42 days in a row. We had 6 weeks where we went pads one day, and then you went pads in the morning, and then you had a special teams practice in the afternoon. So if you weren't on special teams, you didn't have to show up. So we go pads, off, and we ran that rotation for 6 weeks. And then we went into training camp, or we went into the regular season. You'd go walk through on Monday, Tuesday day off, pads on Wednesday, pads on Thursday, shells on Friday, walk through Saturday, play Sunday. And we ran that for better part of like 2 years. And then when I went to Dick Vermeil, all of a sudden we were out there for what we call the baton death marches, where they were 3-hour practices in pads. And we did those 2-a-days. And to the point where like we had people fucking quit. Just be like, I ain't doing it. I mean, like all the time. I remember in training camp, people would be like, they can't fire us all. And be like, shut up. So I like. And
were there a lot of injuries? I'm curious. Like,
no, not at all what you've seen today. And I think, and I think the
is that like the hurt versus injured days?
Well,
like people were probably hurt.
Well, but everybody was playing at like this kind of like a bruised and beat deficit. So like you played at this like fast 80%, and everybody kind of was at the same level because everybody was kind of beat up. Like nobody feels good in the NFL. Everybody's hurt. Like whether like how you manage it, and I think everybody was like in the same level. And then the problem is you get out there and like, you know, you hit, you do whatever, everybody freshens up, and everybody goes out, and, you know, you have adrenaline and all these other key factors to go bang it on Sunday, but everybody's playing at the same. Now you have a situation where dudes are so fresh and not beat up and not like don't have that edge off, that's where I think the injuries are coming from.
Very good point.
I remember when the new CBA came out and I had just retired, I remember Tony Gonzalez called me and he's like, dude, you got to come back. We could play for another 20 years on this deal. And he's like, he goes, we hit more in training camp for Dick Vermeil than a 10-year, like a kid 10 years in the NFL going forward from this day will ever see in his life, including the games. And I was like, no fucking way. And he's like, dude, we could play forever. He's like, if we had started in this, we'd be like 40 years old still out here playing. And Tony ran it into his late 30s. So I don't know. I mean, the NFL had a serious issue. They had the, head injuries, concussions. I mean, that shit really was spinning out. And instead of being like, hey, let's figure out really why this is happening. Could it be the fact that the helmet concussions are getting crystallized? If like every time I got on, probably don't do it anymore, but every time I got on a plane to fly home, they always handed you 2 beers. And guys would bring Crown Royal, and I didn't necessarily drink because I had to drive home. Other dudes would have their wives come pick them up, but you take a bunch of traumatic brain injuries, and next thing you drink a bunch of booze and it crystallizes and becomes more of an issue. And then they come around and hand you out painkillers in little white boxes, and we would kind of shake them and like rattlesnakes, like rattlers. And I think the liberal prescription of painkillers, I think all of these are better factors in terms of traumatic brain injury than the hit. I mean, the hits are obviously the ingredients, but all that stuff is the stuff that, you put it in the oven and that's what cooks it. So instead of coming out and being like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have been giving these guys alcohol and shouldn't probably be pumping them full of painkillers and all the other stuff. Let's look at this thing more intelligently. But what they did is they just demonized the hitting because it was easier to do that than actually come out and say, yeah, we shouldn't have been giving these guys this and this and this, because that opens them up for liability. So I think by effectively neutering the game and trying to reduce all this, all they're doing is creating I think a bigger pool for injuries that we're going to see. So the fact that you had more demanding practices kind of muted that intensity, which kept the impacts and the injuries less severe, would you say? Is that, yeah. That's an interesting concept. Well, and especially for offensive linemen, the only way you learn your job is actually live bullets in pads, like in practice. That's where you get, when I watched the first few games when we started talking about this, I was amazed to see like how straight-legged and how high guys were playing. Like they were like looking around. And I remember thinking like, man, these dudes are playing really high, like real straight-legged, a lot of bending at the waist, which just happens early in training camp because you just haven't been doing it. And then as training camp and the season goes on, all of a sudden you see like pad level come down. People are flat back coming off the ball. They're not looking around, and people are like actually playing with a pad level, which is conducive towards success. And when I watch the games, dudes still look like they're playing high, not bending their knees and like not doing all those little things. And you learn that stuff in like live bullets in practice. It's tough to learn that pad level and that level of conditioning in just walkthroughs. I mean, you can take veteran guys, like you could take a guy like Will Shields and just have him do walkthroughs and he's not going to have any issues. But like young guys, especially dudes who might not have had the preseason and all of a sudden injury and they get thrust into this job and don't have the experience. So I think I would blame it on that. Not that the NFL is going to go back and, go old school Dick Vermeil and strap it up for 3 hours, every day. But I think by protecting the players, they're putting them at more of a risk.
Now, it's interesting because now does that put the onus on the players to make sure that they get that preparation and that fitness because of the fact that, they're going to have higher velocities and Tex sent me that interview with Russell Wilson about him and how much he puts into his preparation in the off season and the staff he has around him. Is that something that we should encourage? If you're a player agent, I would think that would be one of the things that you would be talking about if the team can't provide that.
Yeah. I like the stuff with Russell Wilson is obviously it's pretty over the top and you probably need a certain financial investment in you as a player to feel like guys can do that. But I mean, even if it was a quarter of that and a dude was dropping $250,000, but he was making, a few $1 million, it feels like money well spent. I think it's always been put on the shoulders of the players to prepare themselves. Like if you, regardless of whether or not you train there in the off season or you train somewhere else, when you come back, there is a very real set of not only tests, but everybody has to make the team. I mean, the only guy who probably didn't really have to worry about making the team was probably Patrick Mahomes. He signs that big contract. Like, I got this. But like, I never went into a situation into training camp where I was like, oh, I know I got this. Like, I always went in thinking like I had to go in and earn a job, even though I had a job. And I had to, and I always remember thinking like, even with working with young players, they'd ask me, I'd always help them. And some of the guys like, why you help these guys? I'm like, well, shit, if they can take my job or if they don't play well, that doesn't push me to play hard. And so I always liked feeling like somebody was behind me, pushing me, playing well to kind of push me to kind of, bust my ass a little bit harder. And, sometimes you need that little bit of motivation. So I think that as a current NFL player, that if you're not looking at how do I not only make sure I'm the healthiest individual, how do I make sure that not only am I the strongest, fittest, most prepared individual that's able to move well through space. I mean, if I'm not looking at different ways outside the conventional to make that happen, I think you're leaving performance and money on the table. I mean, and it can be, there are so many different avenues that you can research, and I know people go hard in certain directions, but there's just some and I'm sure Derek can get into this. I mean, just the conversation of building an aerobic base is the ability to be able to recover in between plays. I mean, when was the last time that got pushed out? So, I mean, there's just some really basic stuff. I mean, how many guys are having custom meal delivery stuff? So I had to find a chef and they would cook and we would do meals just so that I came home and they're like, I didn't have to go out to the store and cook. I could just grab something. I mean, how many teams are setting that up? At the Eagles, it was pretty dope. We had this kick-ass kitchen and this amazing chef, and he was like, hey, if you want to bring me anything in the morning, I'll cook it and you can take it home. So I'd bring him like a turkey, I'd bring him prime rib, and the dude had these amazing smokers because Andy Reid likes to eat. So this dude was a good cook. And but yeah, I don't know, like it feels like we shouldn't be having this conversation in 2020, but maybe guys just weren't prepared for this COVID thing and didn't train, didn't do what they needed to do, and maybe now we're seeing that kind of deficit.
Yeah, and I had these conversations with somebody at the NFL level about because the CBA was coming up to be renewed, and how is off-season training going to look, because there are a lot of strength coaches who thought that there still wasn't enough emphasis on strength and conditioning through that period. I think they had 2 weeks plus 3 weeks, like 2 weeks with just strength and conditioning, and then 3 weeks with strength and conditioning and position coaches. And then it was just practice OTAs. So there was some discussion around how could we even, I think I even proposed to him, I said, maybe they should have 2 to 3 weeks before training camp when they're just with strength and conditioning. So there is a bit of a blend in, and making sure, because what did they have, 5-6 weeks between the end of OTAs and training camp? And a lot of guys just went to Florida and, were on their yachts or whatever. And then you come back into training camp and boom, hamstring, ACL, So this is just like everything. I think COVID has accelerated a lot of things, whether it's meal delivery, whether it's Zoom conversations. But in this case, it's like it's punching them in the mouth right now. So,
well, you always have, like, after the last OTAs, you always had like 5 or 6 weeks off.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty consistent. And I remember like the one, and this was kind of the last hurrah every year, was always 4th of July, because we always went to training camp the third week of July. So like 4th of July was like, we're going to go hard, and that'll be the last one. And then we got to, buckle it down and get ready. We got a couple weeks till training camp. But I think what happened, the OTAs and all, I just think people are at a deficit. And then the problem is, these teams go in and, they lay out their plan, everything's ready to go. They're probably trying to, make changes, make sure people aren't getting infected. And then it's, putting these guys into the meat grinder, especially without a preseason. Not that preseason is that valuable, but it still gives people time to develop some young players and get some reps. We'd go out there as ones and play the first series or maybe the first 2 or 3 series in the first game, and then you kind of, trade it back down. But like, there is a value in that. You go on the road, you get to sleep somewhere else, you get to hit, go and play against somebody else. And I think that all this is in the preparation. And I'll be really interested to see, the injury kind of numbers when they look at like the percentage of injuries, how, what the injuries were when they start laying it down over the course of like the 5 or 10 or last years, 5 to 10 of, in years previous, how far this compares, and then what it looks like going forward. If all of a sudden we look and we're like, hey, there's X amount of injuries and now it's tripled in 20, but then it goes back down, then we'll know that it was probably something that had to do with the the COVID environment and the way they handled it.
I've got some quick stats. This is only for 2020 season through week 9 here, but 345 total players on the IR. So done for the year here. 14 of those are Achilles related. 71 are knee related. What I found didn't break down in specific injury, but 71 knees, and then 22 ankles. In our previous discussion, a lot of lower leg injuries. A little team breakdown. I found San Francisco had the most with 19. San Francisco and Denver, both at 19, according to lists. New England was third with 18. And then a lot of teams with 7 or 8 is about the average. In that, Pittsburgh and KC were just right at the top of that. So their players, they have opportunity practicing their plays, system style, all then are now continuing to stay healthy and getting out there.
So in 2019, ACL tears declined from 57 to 47, while MCL tears dropped from 132 to 109. It said remaining, including, soft tissue lower injuries came with 580 and 610. And it looked like 2019 had less injuries, even though they had 485 concussion evaluations performed during the game. So it looks like actually 2019 was down. I'd be interested to see. I don't think we could pull it without a little bit of crunching numbers, but to be able to say, hey, what did how many people were on IR? What were the injuries looking like in 2019? I guarantee it's going to be dramatically higher.
Yeah, 2019 was definitely an anomaly because all the years before that, at least from an ACL point of view, I think it was like 50 and 60s for at least 5 years there, 5 or 6 years. So and then it makes me think, because I have a little bit of inside information here and there, but if you have a Russell Wilson who's getting it done on his own and having his own team, does that influence the players on that team, such as like Tom Brady? Michael Jordan had guys over to his place to play and work out with him. I know Patrick Mahomes guy moved to Kansas City. He was in Texas, moved to Kansas City, and he's now training more of the guys in the offseason when the team's not training them. So is that a huge influence to have that marquee player who has sort of the private group around him making him a better player? Does that trickle down?
I don't know how that could hurt you. I mean, I can't tell you what percentage that increases, but the teams that I've known that were really good tended to have like a pretty good culture in that way. I never trained in an off season with an NFL team because they never give me an off season workout deal. But when I trained down in Tampa with Rafael, we had probably 9 to 10 NFL players that consistently showed up every single day. It was Ed Muitalo, Jeff Mitchell, myself, John McLaughlin, and there was about 4 or 5 others. And we had like the energy and the pushing and the training, the shit talking, and like just the energy of that environment. Other guys would come in for like a week or whatnot, and they were like, shit, you guys are killing it. And I think when you put a bunch of individuals in there, maybe different than the team where there's maybe some other politics, but for the most part, guys were banging. And I think if you can create that almost group within a group, and you can create a nucleus of individuals that are hard charging, and winning the Super Bowl. Like I played in 3 NFC championship games, never got a chance to play in the Super Bowl or win one, but I can imagine the feeling of winning the Super Bowl coming in that next year. Like we're not a flash in the pan. Like this just wasn't a fluke. And so that feeling of like, hey, like, do we have the opportunity to have a dynasty? Can we be, in 2020, can we be like the Dallas Cowboys were in the 90s with Aikman and, Nate Newton and all those guys where, Emmitt Smith, where like, the Cowboys were just this dynasty, or like the Steelers in the 70s. And I think every NFL, I felt like that at the Eagles, that we had this opportunity for a dynasty. And I always felt like we were a couple players away. If we could have just converted a few people, I think we could have had that dynasty. But I like when I look at the Kansas City Chiefs, like they have the potential and the pieces, and they've kept their offensive line intact, and to pay Mahomes that money, and they got a pretty good running back, and I think they have the opportunity in terms of keeping their coaches, because I think that what happens too is really successful teams end up losing all their coaches. Like the defensive coordinator gets a head job, offensive coordinator gets a good job, and all of a sudden these teams just get splintered. And I think what Andy's done really well in terms of getting Spags back and just keeping some of the really good coaches around is they have that opportunity. And I think those dudes sense that like we got an opportunity to have like the kind of dynasty, like we can set the records for the next one. And, that probably means, Mahomes takes a little bit of that coin and, builds a training facility, and, hey, this is where we're going to train in the offseason. Let's bring in the best people and let's make it kick ass. And why the fuck shouldn't he?
Yes.
I mean, that like, fuck, if I was on that team, I'd be like, sweet, what time we showing up? Like
observation, John, when Derek, strength coach Texas, did an internship down there, and all these pros would come back during the summer and utilize the facility during sport team off time. And it looks like there's a transition from, instead of going back to your alma mater, maybe now because COVID's limitation, you look within your local teammates, which then brings your team closer together, same page, and say things without saying things kind of deal. So maybe there is a good to come of this, to let the good teams really come together on that off-season and perspective.
Yeah.
I always wondered, sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Oh, I was going to say, so as a former NFL guy, John, what would, Chunky Soup probably wouldn't be your guy to that's too soon?
Fuck, no, it was funny because the other day somebody posted a clip like this. It was a great throw. Like we had a really good touchdown. It was against Tampa Bay. I remember the game. As I'm watching it, I remember the fucking play. And Donovan actually made a really nice touch pass. And everybody's like, man, and I'm like, dude, I was like, dude, the amount of times where I was standing there and I saw this ball just bounce at the dude's feet, and I'd be like, God damn it. And you look back and there was nobody around, and I'm like, this dude, these are fucking easy throws. Not that I can make it, but it sucks to bust your ass and then to see the guy just
when you're ranked as a top tier quarterback and getting paid to do the job, you better be able to consistently.
Yeah.
So I guess, not to get you down that wormhole, but okay, so what would the team captain, whoever that is, have to do to invest in a gym? Would it have to be the Rock setup, or do you think you know what I mean? What's the burden?
Kind of like what we built up at Power Athlete.
If you had that,
yeah,
and you invited the guys over to train, would they be happy to show?
Yeah. Oh fuck yeah. Well, we got a hill on the back. We got heavy things to flip. We got all the barbells in the training. The only thing we're missing, which we could have totally graded the pasture and put in a dope 100-meter track.
Yeah.
Then have a guy like Derek come down and be like, man, you guys got your own custom 100-meter track. and you guys got a facility. I mean, like realistically, like if we cleared out the car shop and just made that like a facility and had like a 100-meter track, like in hindsight, if I wasn't such an idiot when I was playing, I would have built something like this, like kind of like a mecca where, and then just invited people and been like, hey man, I'm in, Bee Cave, Texas. You guys want to come down and train, invite people to come in and, and then college guys and young guys and like create a pretty good environment and have some really, epic people come in like, hey, Derek's going to fly in from Vancouver and, work with us. And, you got a resident strength coach, a guy who's, intelligent enough, but ego isn't so big that he can't bring in other experts. That's a shit that always bothers me. And I think why I always really loved Raphael was Raphael was more than happy to like train, have anybody come in, and there wasn't any ego. He just wanted to he wanted everybody to be better and whatever it looked like. And I think sometimes some of these guys guard it like a little fiefdom. But man, if Mahomes is doing that, and he should, I don't know where he lives.
So the investment, like we kind of went a little high on the investment there. Don't you think? Like you could probably get that done for like $20,000. Could you?
No, I mean, like, no, I mean, guys will train anywhere. Like, I remember hearing stories of where Mike Webster trained was in the downstairs of a bar. I mean, but I think like if you want people to consistently show up, and like it's always nice. Like I love walking into our facility, especially when the floors were cleaned yesterday, which I'm always like, yes. And like seeing like nice equipment, having all the dope Sornex stuff, it just like it's nice. Like all the bars are good, the plates aren't like mismatched, and it's like it just is a good environment. People come in and they're like, oh, people that actually train fucking work out here. Mm-hmm. So I mean, all I would do is I would probably bring in somebody legit to grade the hill in the back because we have a little hill run, but also like down in the pastures, put in like a dope 100-meter track and have it all nice. And then just invite people to come, man, and be like, you should, it's a dope area. Like if you can put that environment together, I think you really extend not only the team, but I think you just extend your own career.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with COVID and all that, but if you got a consistent group of guys that you're going to train with, and you want to keep it, I don't know, small group, that makes perfect sense. And I don't know why it's not being done. And I still think it should be pushed from the agents because it's in their best interest too.
Yeah. Man, like I sometimes wonder if the agents just want to tell you, like, tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what's in your best interest. Like I can't really think of my agent being like, oh, you should build a facility and do this. I mean, like, I think the agents are just like, fuck, man, don't blow all your money on stupid shit, whereas building a facility isn't. But I think for like a guy like Holmes, I have no idea where he lives. I mean, he could live out in Overland Park or, I mean, who knows? But I mean, his ability to probably buy something and build something and get it up pretty fast and stock it and bring people in, be probably a pretty amazing situation. I mean, I think like, what did I just see him do? Obviously, he bought a piece of...
Royals, yeah.
Yeah, the Royals, but he did something else where he bought like, I don't know, 10,000 people lunch or like did something for like, it was pretty interesting. And I'm like, man, I appreciate that dude is got some activism and like, the ability to kind of spend some stuff and to make himself get out there. So, but I don't think, if let's say a dude chunked 150 or 200 grand at something,
right? I
mean, it's going to pay for itself over the course of a career.
And that's like a really epic fucking facility. Like, yeah, that's killer. You could have tons of friends and throw a hell of a party.
Yeah. And have people show up, and especially here in Texas, like you could have people show up at barbecue trailers.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, there's an endless supply of neat things that you can do, and I think the problem though is when you're that age, like you almost have to have somebody tell you. Like I'm,
you need a veteran.
Well, at 40 plus, like I understand it, but like, could I have told my like 25, 26-year-old self? Like, I don't know if I would have listened or understood it, but if somebody had been like, hey man, this is what you should do, I would have been like, that's a great idea.
That's gonna be my next question.
Yeah. So I think age, sometimes people just need the permission from somebody or the idea. And it's because nobody had necessarily done it. Like I hadn't really ever seen, like I still have never seen anything like it. So, but doesn't mean it can't be built.
Right. Derek, when you go and work with teams, are you strictly working with the coaches, or you get the opportunity to coach up the athletes on those NFL teams?
It depends. It depends on the team. It depends on the time of year that I go. Because a lot of the time, if I go there, it might be a time when the athletes aren't there so that the coaches have more time to spend with me. But there have been cases where I've gone and there's been athletes there and we work with them together. So it really depends on the organization and the time of the year. But I do always ask them, like, do you guys have good relationships with the private sector trainers that work with your guys when they're not at the facility or they're not with you? And
no.
And sometimes I hear yes, and sometimes no. And so there's, I think that's the missing link right now, is like developing these, relationships with the private sector and understanding, okay, you've got your way of doing things. This is kind of what we're doing. Let's kind of meet in the middle a bit so that we have some continuity. I think would be really good, but I don't know if that's happening. John would have a better idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't even, like, when I left in the off season, they would send me, like, they'd overnight me the program.
Yep.
And I would look at it and be like, okay, this looks good. And then I would just go do what I was going to do. And they never really, that's not true. So the first off season after I got hurt, I trained that whole off season. And then I came back, and after I started 16 games, I left. And that's when I met Raphael. But they never really, like, I guess the check was when you come back from mini camp and OTAs, and I came back in good shape, and like everything was moving well, and went to go lift weights, and I was strong. Like, I think those dudes were kind of like, well, everything looks like it's panning out, and then went out and played and was fine. So I think if I'd come back out of shape or weaker or not the player I was, I think they probably would have been like, whatever you're doing, you need to fucking change it. And we would have had to come to Jesus moment. But I remember thinking, like, Wolfie and Tommy being like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, man. So I think there's some faith in that way. But it's not like they, came down and visited me to check out what I was doing, or, hey, what kind of training are you doing?
Yeah, like this off season, unfortunately, I was supposed to do some work with a NHL team and visit some of the private sector trainers that the players would be working with, but that never materialized. So I think maybe people are starting to think about that. And obviously now, because maybe there will be less times when facilities will be open, the training facility, the team's facility, that you have to have some sort of outreach and communication, to make sure it's getting done. So I don't know how you formalize that.
I'm still just kind of tripping out on that number, that there were 47 ACL tears over the course of the whole season in the NFL in 2019, and here we are sitting in 2020, 9 games through, and we're at 30.
Yeah.
So I mean, on pace for 60,
and that's no preseason too, right?
Yeah, that's no preseason. So
where you'd usually get half of them.
Yeah, I mean, that first preseason, and really it's that first 3 games. Like, I always felt like if you can make it out of the injury, like if you can avoid the injury bug for the first 3 games, you're usually pretty good. And as I was thinking back as we were talking, I'm like, man, the amount of, like, I ruptured my patellar tendon and broke my leg in the season opener. So, like, I potentially had 2 career-ending injuries in the season openers. And so, like, I always felt like if I could get through the season opener in the first few games, like, I'll be fine. But I mean, that's where really the rash of injuries, and you see a lot of stuff in those first 3 games.
Well, I'm wondering, like, we're at the midpoint, roughly. Do you think it's going to normalize and die down? Like, we've gone through that filtration process and we've had the injuries. The guys that were weak got the injuries. Now the remaining 7 games, is it going to be smoother sailing, do you think, or more of the same?
You know what? We would have to probably pull the numbers and see if, like, the ACL injuries, like how they kind of, categorize in the different quarters of the season. Like, if like 70% are in the first quarter, like the first 4 games, and then like, 10, and it kind of, starts dwindling. And I wonder if history tells us that. I mean, I would say that feels right, but without seeing the data on that one, could you say, like, I mean, geez, Christian McCaffrey comes back, and next thing you know, he's injured again. So, I mean, is it that, one guy gets through one thing and gets to another? The one thing which is amazing is we were going, and I was watching these clips, especially when you sent over some of the pre-podcast notes, was none of these looked like they were injuries. Like, they look like normal hits, dudes moving, the tight end for the Broncos that tore his ACL. I mean, it wasn't something that, like, like if you saw the guy go down, that you wouldn't just assume that gets right back up. So that's where it is. Whereas I always think about some of these big injuries where you see it and you're like, ooh, shit, that guy got hurt. That guy, you're like, that guy got hurt on that play? And they show the replay, and even the announcers are like, I don't see it. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think, guys get injured, and then you need the evaluation after the game, maybe a couple of MRIs, a couple of different opinions, and then sometimes the injury doesn't get announced till like 3 days later, which is interesting too. So,
well, there's always the idea that they can the training staff can work their magic and effectively like get you, because the thing is they have to turn out like, what is it, probable. There's 3 classifications. Like, you'll probably play, you'll maybe play, and you're definitely out. And the problem is if
questionable.
They put you questionable. If you're questionable or out and you play, then they kind of like, and you can't do that because there's a whole kind of situation with that. But it's definitely interesting to see that guys are just taking these normal hits and seem to have some more catastrophic stuff. So that feels different than I've seen in any other season.
So, Tex, what are some bright spots from Week 9?
Well, we have players that are peaking. Despite of all this that we're discussing on the injury and the negative side, there are some dudes that are having career years, including Vikings running back Dalvin Cook. So this is the second week in a row this guy's come up because he is essentially lightning in a bottle and reviving the Vikings season, almost basically a MVP candidate because they were 1-5 and now they're streaking, or at least he's streaking.
What year is this for him? Second year?
Oh man,
this is his 4th year because he missed a year with the ACL.
That's right.
So a new knee, and he's coming out there and having a career year.
Good for him.
He's doing the Adrian Peterson.
And a Viking, no less.
Yeah. One thing I was wondering, and I don't know if you could pull this up, what was his 40 time at the Combine? Because there was one clip I sent you guys where he just kind of broke through, and then he accelerated, and he kept accelerating, and nobody was catching him. And I'm just wondering, wow, it looks like he has some good sprint.
He ran a 4.5. Former Florida State running back Dalvin Cook runs a 4.5 40.
Huh. Okay.
It's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's not like. There's probably defensive ends out there who are faster than that. So that's. That's surprising. But I mean, the dude is so patient. Like, that was the one thing when I was watching the clips. He's just so patient when he gets to the line. Like, he's not necessarily forcing. He was waiting for things to happen, and that patience, and then be able to put his foot in the ground and change speeds in different directions is pretty good. I mean, it's funny. I thought he was younger. I thought he was maybe like a 1st or 2nd year guy, but now you say he's 4. That makes sense.
What? How much does he weigh?
Let's see. 210 at the Combine. This Combine stat, 210.
210. He looks bigger.
Yeah.
He just looks.
Maybe he is. Bigger. I mean, that's just the program. I mean, Tex, what did you weigh in your high school program? 240.
Oh, high school football? Well, 5'10".
240.
195, which says everything.
So I'll tell you, though, the one thing, and
it says 5'10", 209 for his current.
So the one I was really kind of excited about the other night on Sunday night was I really want to see Tom Brady and
another bright spot is Alvin Kamara, the Saints running back, is just
he's killing it too.
Killing it,
dude. I was so excited for that game, like Tom Brady versus
Drew
Brees. I mean, like
also time.
Oh, Father Time just out there beating each other. So I thought that was going to be a great game, and it was awful. Like, it was not good. Like, I don't even think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a first down until like halftime.
So I did have a question in that respect, John. Like, there are these trap games or the look ahead game. This was the exact opposite. You have the division on the line, the opportunity to get one leg up above your true rival and then you just don't show up. So is it one player decides, oh, I have a bad play, and then the rest of the team follows that negative attitude, or is it the coach? Like, how? I understand how you can overlook a team because you got a big game coming up, but how do you just whiff on this great opportunity for your season?
I've never seen anything like that. I mean, to have a guy like Tom Brady, who they've come in and put so much hype in this, and Drew Brees coming out, and like what I was expecting was like a 45-43 kind of shootout, and all of a sudden, like, Brady goes 3 and out, and then the Saints basically do like a 9-play drive, go down and score like a beautiful drive. And I remember thinking like, oh shit, like Brady in the Tampa Bay is in trouble, because if you get the ball first and you don't go put a good drive together, and then the other team comes out and puts a really good drive together, that's like a death nail. Like that's a bad deal. And then it's like, then, now the defense is tired. And then if you go 3 and out again, you're going to put them back on the field. And it just looked like the defense spent a ton of time out there. We're super tired, and they just couldn't get anything going.
And the introduction of Antonio Brown, does that have any impact, like negatively, or?
I don't know how it could help. I mean, like, okay, so you have a guy like Antonio Brown who's super talented. Nobody's disputing his talent, has had this kind of tumultuous past in this relationship with Brady, and they bring him in during probably what could be the biggest game of their season, and they go 38-3 and they lose. Like, I wouldn't blame it on Antonio Brown, but as the head coach, I'd probably be like, get your shit and get out of here. I don't know what this is, but this is bad karma or bad luck. But, they're like, and I heard a bunch of interviews with him, which I thought were pretty good, where he's like, I learned my lesson, like he was on the street and like, I've reformed, saying all the right things. But then you think, that guy's been a number 1 receiver. He's been a star for a lot of years and a really, high talented dude. And now all of a sudden he's the 3rd or 4th guy. Like, how long does that last? Where he feels like, or maybe he's like, fuck man, I'm stoked to be in the league and playing with Tom Brady. So I just looked at it and thought, man, these guys just look really flat. And that's not what I expected for them. I expected those guys were going to be at home. The weather was good. It was a little rainy, typical Tampa weather. And, all of a sudden they got the New Orleans Saints coming in, and this is their chance to prove that they are,
dome team in Tampa humidity.
And it was raining. Like I was like, man, this is like this is the making of like, the NFL films. Like, it was a stormy night in Tampa Bay. Like, that's what I was waiting. And like, all of a sudden it just was awful. I mean, it'd be easy to kind of throw it on Antonio Brown and be like, get rid of that dude. But who knows? Maybe they're able to rally back.
Who they got next week?
I have that pulled up. 1 second, please.
Because that'll be an important game, I would think, to shake that off. Yeah.
They are at Carolina, who's
awful.
No, they're playing very well. They almost beat Kansas
good?
City. Oh, yes. Teddy Two Gloves, Teddy Bridgewater, great redemption story, which...
That's right.
Man, once you give an athlete an opportunity, and with a great attitude... and that's a college coach having great success in his first year in the NFL, even with all the COVID and the transition, a dude succeeding despite of all these things that we've spoken of.
And that's another division game.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Wow.
And hopefully he's got McCaffrey back, and that will be your NFL Films game, John.
Oh, yeah. No, that's going to be a good one. I am a Tom Brady fan, but I was kind of imagining if like him and Belichick are like texting each other like, I'm really sorry, we shouldn't have break. I miss you. Or, and like just seeing Cam Newton out there, I'm like, God damn. Like, they're running the same offense, putting him in the same positions. Like, it's interesting to see when a guy has that much experience in the system and the receivers and the way Tom approached it. So it's really, they're probably like, I miss you.
Another thing we need to touch on is Alex Smith's return to the starting lineup. So we've seen some ugly ankle issues, and this is an opportunity to give us hope for dudes returning like Prescott. So what is going through this athlete's mind? You think he's emotionally over said injury, that he can focus on full contact, full speed starting?
As long as he doesn't watch his own ESPN documentary again, I think he'll be fine. Because after watching that, I was devastated.
It's one of those things where I purposely never want to watch that. It's like the Joe Namath deal.
Yeah.
Like, but how could he not step back and like, there has to be something in the back of his head unless he just went and got hypnotized. Like, I always remember thinking, like, can we get a dude at hypnotized to hypnotize this dude that he didn't play in the first half? There's sometimes people, man, they just start hearing things and, become their own worst enemy. And, they get this like interior coach that's coaching them in real time. And like, that just becomes the death. You just got to almost like do the work, turn your brain off and just go play, and it becomes automatic. I played with a guy named Doug Brzezinski, and Doug was like he was like arguing with himself during the plays, and like I should, and I remember being like, dude, you're stressing me out, but like, why are you putting in so much pressure? You know what to do, just go out and do it. And he just could never get in front of that. But Alex Smith, man, like it was a pretty sweet deal when he came back a couple weeks ago, and they put him in, and his wife and kids were in the stands, and like the look on his wife's face, like she was in tears, like having lived this. And I remember like, dude, like I want that guy to do well. It's nice to have his kids get out there and see him play.
Yeah, I was a big Alex Smith fan. Like I know some people who worked at the 49ers, Mark Uyama, and said he was a good guy. And then I went to my first Chiefs game back in 2015, and we're in the parking lot, staff and player parking lot. Alex Smith rolls up in an old Jeep Wrangler, just wearing street clothes. Well, you could have been some dude off the street, right? Just took the wrong turn at the parking lot, the tailgate, right? And so he just pulls up and, oh, look, that's Alex Smith. Oh, cool, right? And he just walks in and just unassuming, and you're like, okay, this guy's just here to play the game. So it was. I always felt bad. Not felt bad, but I always thought that he got kind of a raw deal in San Francisco. And Harbaugh seeing, Colin Kaepernick coming in as the second coming, and that guy was their franchise guy, and he just, basically sat him for what he thought would be a better opportunity. And I think Alex is a pretty good player, man. He's definitely had a long, good career, and to come back from that injury with that nobody thought he'd come back from, I think it's very admirable.
And to put that into perspective, he was written off, and he found another opportunity. So maybe all those mental steps before to find a new team, learn a new system, and then another new kid comes in Mahomes, and he still seeks out and gets another opportunity to start, and then this injury happens, unfortunately. But maybe and
then gets another chance.
Had all the mental reps to be in this position to succeed.
I mean, good for him.
And I was particularly watching it. Like, I'm not a throwing expert. You guys could probably say better about his throwing. And I know he had 3 interceptions, but there were some extenuating circumstances. But watching him move around the pocket and stuff, I was actually impressed. I thought it was going to be more obvious that leg was not, having the output that he needed. So I don't know what you guys saw, but I thought, okay, I don't feel as bad for him back there and as scared for him.
I didn't get the opportunity to see his reps, but certainly will tune in this weekend. There's a few good games.
He didn't necessarily have like a bounce in his step. Like it wasn't like he dropped back, put his foot in the ground, and kind of like.
Well, he was playing the Giants, John. He didn't really do it.
But I mean, but you also got to figure he's not a young player. He does have a lot of mileage and whatnot, but he obviously has the confidence to stand in the pocket and step up. I mean, that's like the big thing I think with quarterbacks when they get hit. If all of a sudden like they're in a position and they see it and they don't step up, they like step back and they throw off their back leg. Like you always have to step up, and especially if you're stepping forward with momentum going forward opposed from going back. And I think that's like a dead giveaway, especially as an offensive lineman. If your quarterback is consistently trying to like move away and get back, it just deepens the pocket and makes it fucking harder. Like step up. Always, like my job at the Eagles was I always had to stone my dude so Donovan could step up to the left, and like I knew I had to do it. And so because the idea was that the tackles were going to set deep, we set short, and we created the pocket that way. And you have to give the guy room. And I think seeing him step up was pretty good. Like he wasn't fading back, which is kind of where I was like, man, I wonder if this dude's just going to keep fucking floating backwards.
As quarterbacks develop and then get more reps within the league at the speed, do you see that bounce in the step decrease? Or is it this is the way the guy plays and it's very consistent? Some guys just move around or hop around in there? Or is it more hop for a younger player?
I don't like hopping. Like I always think hoppy like a bunny rabbit, but like a guy that like pretty good step, puts his feet in the ground and then steps forward. And so like not just like you see Roethlisberger kind of like stay in shotgun, and they just hike him the ball and his feet don't move and he just stands there like a fucking Statue of Liberty.
Byron Leftwich. He breaks his knee
and just guns the ball. But he Big Ben's what 6'6", 6'7", like he's got a cannon for an arm. And, the reason he can play is he was never a mobile dude. So you take mobility away and he's like, well, that was never my strong suit anyway. So, I mean, he's not like
You mean I don't have to run around? This is perfect.
He's like, I'm just going to stand back here and he's taller than his offensive lineman. So he's got plenty of room to gun it. But nobody would look back and be like, Ben Roethlisberger was really fleet of foot. Like, when was the last time you saw him scramble and get out of something? I don't think anybody knows. Maybe the Super Bowl in like early days. But, I mean, he's definitely winning games, man. And Pittsburgh is on fire.
Mm-hmm. And Pittsburgh versus Joe Burrow this weekend. So
Poor
that'll
kid.
be...
I like Joe Burrow. I like him.
He's great.
I just felt bad that he had to go to Cincinnati.
Derek, did you get an opportunity to watch Tua?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was okay. Like, there wasn't anything where I'm like, wow, right? This guy's going to be something special. I haven't seen that yet. But obviously, you know, they were mentioning that his arm strength didn't appear to be that good or that strong. So, you know, he's doing the shorter throws, and they were designing stuff around his ability or inability, I guess. And it'll be interesting to see how he develops, and if he does, you know, because they were talking about the whole idea that, okay, we're going to pull, was it Fitzpatrick and put him in because we got to do it now, because if we have a good season, then we'll never pull Fitzpatrick. And, you know, and you're like, well, I don't know, you just want to win, right? So I assume this is obviously part of that development plan, but we'll see.
Man, I thought he moved pretty well. I saw some of the scramble stuff. Like, my thought in the back of the head is like, you know, can his hip take the beating?
Yeah,
I mean, you know,
That was going to be my question. When you see a scrambler like him, and in the same game you got to see Kyler Murray, do you see a difference between their speed and change direction, knowing this one athlete had this major injury?
Yeah, I mean, Murray, like somebody said, like, oh, who do you think's faster, Murray or Lamar Jackson? And they said, well, they're different. Murray's more quick, and he seems very nimble, probably more so than Tua, in my opinion. It's not that Tua is not great and mobile and athletic, but there's something about Murray where he just has these gear changes that look really different to me, that separate him. So, you know, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see which of these young quarterbacks does kind of rise up and, you know, gets to that next level and takes his team. But right now I'm still like just watching. Yeah. I don't know.
What do you think like, I mean, you know, you made an interesting point about like the front office, like, you know, seeing success with Fitzpatrick and pulling him out and putting Tua in, because, I mean, he was their first round draft pick, and they're seeing all these other young guys getting their opportunity. You think it was kind of like that FOMO deal where they're like the fear of missing out, that like, if we don't give this young guy a chance, which is crazy because, I mean, they didn't draft him to come in and start. They drafted him as kind of like a bit of a gamble. They knew the injury. They knew what he had, and I kind of thought that he was kind of maybe a 2 or 3 year project. Like, he's going to come back that first year, give him a year, like 2 years to kind of, you know, crystallize and get ready for it. So I don't know if I would have made that move as a...
Yeah, Mahomes, right? Like...
Yeah. Yeah,
that's the same Mahomes deal, right? Like, he had a year, he got mentored, there wasn't that pressure, and I mean, that worked out okay. You know, he wasn't rookie of the year, but whatever, he's kind of made up for it. So
maybe difference in organizations, like you know, I can't necessarily think of a smart, intelligent choice that the Miami Dolphins have made in a long time, where people are like,
Flores, he's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, but for the most part, like when you think of like strategic, intelligent decisions in the NFL, is the Miami Dolphins somewhere at the top on that?
Is that an oxymoron? What I heard, and this is just me observing as a fan over here, but they have the Texans pick, which is going to be basically top 5, essentially. So they are giving this kid a shot to, 1, test him to see if he was worth that pick, and 2, are they going to shop him because they could get some stellar stud of this new class coming out that they could draft, or propel themselves with their 2 first-round picks up to number 1 and take the golden boy.
So it's a marketing play. Right now they're marketing.
Oh, you think by putting him out there, they're
marketing the talent.
Man, I'll just give you, like, that's not insane, but give me one time when that has happened. And I'll just give you like find me one time in the history of the NFL where somebody takes, because what was Tua picked?
5.
Yeah. So top 5 NFL draft pick is traded in his rookie season after becoming their starter.
Rosen, Arizona Cardinals.
They did that in Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, to the Dolphins.
Okay. So there is precedent. So that is a precedent. Okay. So maybe they felt like this kid isn't the future for us, but if we can get him out there and showcase him, then we can maybe shop him, get somebody interested.
Way too smart. Or like way too thoughtful.
That's way too Belichick.
Yeah.
That's like
Flores was the defensive coordinator from that LA Rams Super Bowl.
Yeah. Maybe he's sharp,
so
man.
He's bringing that type of thought and paradigm shift into like shuffling the cards and kind of showing what you got.
Maybe not.
It's just
a couple of dudes speculating.
It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how this one plays out. I would be surprised with that, but I mean, Fitzpatrick wasn't playing bad.
No.
I thought he kind of and
I enjoy his antics.
Oh yeah, dude. He did you see him? I think he shaved his beard.
Oh,
he cut it and rocked boy shorts in honor of a traded teammate.
He's definitely a funny dude. And I'll tell you though. I mean, he kind of made it feel like it was his team, and I think they put him in that role, and then to like bench him and for a young guy is
Maybe he's in on it.
Maybe
he's in on the marketing play. Cut your beard, wear these boys shorts. What's going on? We're showcasing, showing we're gonna be trading. You're back in. Don't worry.
Man, it would be so hard.
Yeah, you got to mentor this new guy we're going to bring in.
Yeah, you are the quarterback coach in the room who also suits up. I mean, Tua's injury is so. When I was out at Cal for their alumni week, and this is almost a year ago, as I was kind of meeting some of the alumni, there was a guy who was older than me who was an orthopedic surgeon and played at Cal. He was in the Bay. I think he was a Bay Area guy, or I want to say like a South San Francisco guy, and he was or is the top like hip orthopedic trauma surgeon. Right. And so we were just rapping about it, and that Tua's injury had happened. And of course I'm like, hey, what do you think about that? And he's like, let me get, talk about necrosis and Bo Jackson. And he's like, he goes, they actually forwarded me the x-rays. And so I got some inside scoop on that. And he's like, it's very similar to what Bo Jackson had. And like, he broke the acetabulum and like kind of went through. And the only way you can fix that is you have to go through the glute, and started kind of detailing what had happened to fix it. And his thing was like, if necrosis sets in, he's going to need a new hip. But if he can kind of make it back, and he's like, it's more unlikely than likely. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind that, this is just a guy I met at the Cal game who, ex-player who happened to have this unique knowledge. So if in a situation like that, you got 32 other teams that have looked at that injury report, most teams would have not touched that guy until the later rounds. So I was always amazed that Miami jumped in and drafted that dude.
Yeah, well, all of those injury things are really dicey. Like, I think we're talking about Prescott coming back, and what kind of contract do you negotiate with him until you're really sure that injury doesn't have long-term implications.
I wonder if he comes back. I mean, he must have had a hell of an insurance policy. Because normally when you go into franchise tag, they pay you for that 1 year, and I forgot it was like 25 or 30 mil or something crazy. Mm-hmm. But usually those guys will sign a hell of an insurance contract. Like, I'll give 10% of this thing to Lloyd's of London to cover me for what I think I'm worth, which he probably put his value at $250 million, which is what he wanted. So the injury, if he never comes back, he probably makes good on that insurance policy. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, unless he didn't do that, but most of the guys I know that did salary or franchise tags have some big insurance policy associated with it. So maybe he's like, fuck it, if I don't come back, I don't come back.
And is that like the agent helps with that, right?
Yeah. Usually like, they contact Lloyd's of London, and then they come in and do an analysis and that. I remember I got approached by like doing something like that, and I was like, I'm good.
Well,
like,
I remember one big one was Willis Mcgahey after college in that championship game. That talk about grueling hits where you don't ever want to watch again. Mm-hmm. But then he put it it was big money for me back then, freaking in like high school, but like $1 million. And I was like, wow. And then he put it all on the line to come back. But then he had maybe 10-year career.
He did, man. Well. He was a hell of a running back. He was fast. Didn't he play for Buffalo?
Buffalo and Baltimore.
Yeah, that dude was quick off the corner, especially when they ran him those little outside flip plays. I remember always seeing like him on film and being like, God damn, that dude closes the corner fast.
Oh yeah, so cool with the face mask.
Yeah.
Him and Sean Taylor, Miami.
Like for, there was always two things I liked. I always liked the patient running back, and I liked a dude who could like catch the ball on the outside, and then as he was running, dudes be running straight to the sideline, and they could beat him.
Yeah.
Like to me, that was the best. Where I was like,
space, you're like,
how? Wait a minute, that dude's running straight, and you're running at an angle, and you beat him there. You're like, holy shit, that dude's fast. Like Priest Holmes used to do that. They'd flip him the ball, and he would cover distance so fast. Like the only guy I saw cover distance that fast was Junior Seau.
Well, DK Metcalf now.
Yeah.
Talking about covering distance.
Like that's exciting, especially as a player, to see somebody do shit like that, and you're like, holy shit, that was great. Let's do it again, And people are in the huddle. And you're like, dude, can we run that same play? I want to see that again. And then the coach comes over. What's working out there? You're like, fuck, aren't you watching? That was my favorite. What's working out there? I don't know. You guys are fucking watching this. I don't even know. Like, how am I supposed to But no, it's a fun game. I mean, like you never really know, and I think that's the kind of the mystique of this is like you never really know. Is it a deal like Tua where they're doing something nefarious, where they're trying to put him out there to shop him, or did they see something in practice where they were like, man, like it gives our team a better chance by having him in the game opposed to not having him in the game?
The timing was bye week, so you give this kid 2 weeks of starter reps to prepare for said game that they ended up winning, and he's 2-0. So,
I guess it was a smart decision.
But cool, just some games to look forward to this weekend. Like we said, Tampa and Carolina, and then we have Buffalo, Arizona. And I'll definitely certainly tune into Pittsburgh and Cincinnati just to see, because Pittsburgh's undefeated with a hobbled pocket quarterback, and you got this young gun that's going down, trying to take down the undefeated team.
Well, it looks like the Seahawks are going to play the Rams, which I think would be pretty good.
And division.
I mean, anytime you get to see Russell Wilson go out there, I mean, he's pretty damn good. And the Rams are always pretty exciting. So I think that's a pretty good one. And can the Bears recover?
No.
No?
I know this too.
It says,
I watched 2 weeks and I'm like, I just know.
The hilarious part is the line I heard is, can the Bears keep reeling? just like I like, you obviously hear that, but like the analogy is like, and you guys have fished, but like when you like yank the line, it's like you pull the drag, like that's the reeling. Because I always thought like reeling, like they're pulling back. It's like, no, you're giving line. That's reeling. Oh shit. Oh man.
Their fans are reeling. Sure, sports radio is reeling. Not listening.
Derek, for our listeners, man, what is the lens that you watch these games through? In terms of speed, punt returns, like what points are you looking for that just perks you up catching all these games?
I'm just looking at how they're using some of these people, right? And obviously I'm watching Kansas City, and I'm looking at how they're using people, not necessarily just to catch the ball or carry the ball, but are they using them to create a distraction or pull people away to one side of the field? And because I think that's the most interesting thing is, when somebody's fast, and so then the defense will adjust. And you see that all the time, that Kansas City's now taking advantage of this. And, with Tyreek Hill, and then it looks like Kelsey is getting a lot more opportunities these last couple of games because of that. I don't quite think McCole Hardman's there yet. And I know they've been holding Sammy Watkins out because of the hamstring, and they figured, okay, we're playing the Jets. Okay. And then, they held him out one more week, I think, because they have to bye this weekend. So I think he's going to come back in, and I think he's got some qualities that are interesting in that mix as well. So not having him there, I think, has created, they're still winning, but I thought that he creates a lot of disruption because of what his experience is, plus his speed. Even though he's been in the league a bit longer. So those are the things that I think are interesting. Plus, even this idea that if you have a fast quarterback, how does the defense adjust to that, or how do they change the way they approach it, knowing that this guy could run, and then how does, because like you said with Tua, okay, he can run. He's mobile. He's fast. But is that in his best interest, as John was hinting towards? Because I keep going back to the quarterbacks that were slower are going to have these longer storied careers than necessarily Michael Vick or Randall Cunningham or whoever it is.
But I mean, we talked about this last week or last time we wrapped about Mahomes, like on paper not being that fast.
Yeah.
But yet when you see him move in the pocket and he's able to like move like in space, like he is extremely deceptively fast, and his ability to
he's elusive. So like remember that play against the Titans where he kind of looked like he was going to go out of bounds and then he took it all the way for a touchdown. Yeah, and then that was probably the slowest play I saw last year.
Yeah.
But there's something about like, well, okay, he's going to throw it and then he like shifts this way and that way, and I think he just creates this uncertainty because of his other skill set that makes it more difficult to track him. I don't know. There's an intangible there, and the baseball piece and the confidence that I think we have to factor in. I don't know if it's that he's fast, but he understands what his speed is and how to use it. Which is you can't teach, which is interesting.
Yeah,
so,
well, I mean, it's just experience and opportunity, and then also having a coach that puts you in the right system. I mean, how many opportunities do good players go and they actually kind of wither and die because they don't build the system around them? And I think what Andy's really done well is, he's had some very different quarterbacks, but he had worked with a guy like Donovan, Brett Favre, Michael Vick. I mean, look at the amount of quarterbacks he's had. Alex Smith. I mean, Andy has always had a quarterback that was pretty elusive, moved well, and like if you think that West Coast offense was designed for Joe Montana and also Steve Young, so there's all this stuff called sprint right option, and they run 2 and 3 jet and they slide, and everything is about movement and kind of moving positions, and then a little bit of decoy, and like it's pretty funny. I'll watch the play and I'll be like, oh, sprint right option, and you watch everybody like block down, he does the fake and he comes out and he throws that really nice little pass in the red zone. So like looking at the offense and how Andy's running it, and especially a lot of the misdirection and just some of the things that they're doing. I mean, as a defensive coordinator, it looks like they're doing a lot, but they're not. They're just doing a few of the basics with a ton of looks, which I think is really cool, because then as everybody knows what they're doing, they're well coached and they're doing, and what they're doing is they're doing a lot of like misdirection, a lot of deception, which is like you end up. As an offensive lineman, they'll be like, okay, strong right, and they go through like 12 or 13 different words, and then they're like 2-jet, and all I got to listen to is 2-jet. I know that we're sliding from left to right, left to right. And, and then that the quarterback's going to have a 5 or 7, like a 5-step drop or whatever it is. And then you listen if it's more, but it's pretty good to see them design. I mean, and why wouldn't they design him? I mean, he's a hell of a player. I mean, shit, they just paid him $500 million. Why, the coach isn't going to be like, well, I'm going to do it my way. No, Andy's like, fuck, this kid's a winner. Let's find somebody that works with this kid. And I think that's what all NFL teams should strive. Like, who's the talent? Like, who's the best player I can? And am I malleable enough to be able to design a scheme around this? Like when we go play San Diego and have to play against Junior Seau, they specifically designed the defense where Junior had 0 responsibilities. So like everybody else, like, hey, this guy's force, this guy's this. I mean, everybody has, like, your job is to get the ball, but you have a responsibility in the scheme. Junior had no responsibility. He could stand anywhere he wanted. He could do anything. He could play back. He could play on the line. He could just walk around and just make plays. And they designed the defense because that dude would just make fucking plays. And he was so fast, like even if he was out of position, his speed could make up for it. And I've told the story that he literally walked out on we put a tight end in motion, was outside. He walked out and we ran the ball this way. And as I pulled, and I was playing left guard, and I pulled on the power, and it was kind of like an outside power deal. As I was pulling around, he ran across my face and tackled the ball carrier. And like, I was like, this dude was 10 yards that way, and I took off running, and the dude still beat me there. So I just remember thinking, like, fuck, that guy's fast. And like there were so many opportunities where you see teams be smart enough to like either draft a player that fits the role they need or adjust based off of playmakers. And I think the really good ones are the ones that can adjust. Did
Andy Reid ever do what they say, like, okay, we practice this play but never used it and saved it for like 12 games, and then he just pulls it out like that twirly play in the Super Bowl.
We always had like stuff we do on Fridays, like fun Fridays, and like there was always some like fun trick play that we would always work on. And I remember like we did. Man, like we worked on like a trick play where like we would like fake hike the ball. I mean, there was just a bunch of stuff, and it was just stuff like fun things to put in. And then all of a sudden, like it would never happen. And then all of a sudden they'd come in and they'd call that play, and you'd be like, holy shit, we're really going to run that play? and I think there's like excitement with that, because it's like you feel like the coach is doing everything he can to win this game. Kind of like we practice the shit out of onside kicks. Like that was a big deal for us. Like we had David Akers, who had this like nasty snap where he could like hit the ball, and the dude worked on it all the time. And I remember like we worked on this shit for 2 years, and then we went down to the Dallas Cowboys for the season opener, and all of a sudden the very first play, he's like onside kick, season opener. We're kicking off the Dallas Cowboys, and we onside kick, and we get it, and we crush them. Like it was like one of those.
Set the tone.
Oh yeah, it totally set the tone, and it was like a major FU to the Cowboys. But like that type of stuff, man. Like I appreciate Andy's. I just appreciated his courage and moxie, and the fact that he's like, fuck it, let's give it a shot. And you guys have heard me constantly like let playmakers play. That was something we used to hear all the time. Like, be a playmaker. We let playmakers play. Like, go out there and do what playmakers do. Let's get a cheeseburger. So
awesome. Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Phil, Eagles Giants. Who's going to win that one this weekend?
I'm rooting for the Eagles. I'm consummate rooting for the Eagles.
At New York, fanless.
That sucks.
Well, cool. Derek, thank you very much for the insight and dive in here, man. I know we got a lot of NFL fans that follow, so they'll be able to tune in and use this to improve their perception and ability to view inside the game.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Dude. Yeah, thanks for the chat, amigo.
Yeah.
And I never knew my bones could feel so much pain. For a good old American silver dollar.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. If you're not following Derek Hansen yet, then head to his website, sprintcoach.com, for access to his amazing content, his social platforms, and his podcast. And if you're looking for coaching, training plans, or daily workouts, then you need to head to powerathletehq.com/training now. Or you can check out the show notes to get access to world-class coaching from anywhere that your phone gets service. That's right, daily workouts written, demoed, and monitored by pro coaches that you can crush from the comfort of your home or on your own schedule. And all of this is for just less than $1 a day. Until next time, bye!